Hey guys, Matt, IronTrap Garage, and today we're going to be working on the 32 Roadster project again. So now that we've got the exhaust kind of sorted out, we're waiting on the original radiator to come back from the radiator shop, and we've been mocking up some stuff in the meantime. I'm going to work on doing the shifter for the Columbia rear. So originally these 2-speed Columbia rears were activated with vacuum. They had some switches or knobs in the dash that you pulled, and there's a vacuum canister in the back with like a diaphragm that actually pulled the 2-speed rear and shifted it from high to low. There was all kinds of different parts to actually make that all work. They can be quite expensive, they can be a little bit finicky, and also I'd like to try and keep something simplistic like a hot rodder might have done. So through all my years of looking through magazines and obsessing over this stuff and looking at actual historic cars, I thought it'd be really cool to make a mechanical activation of the 2-speed rear. Basically in the back with the rear, it's just a lever that just clicks back and forth. And I thought we could get rid of all the extra stuff, make it more simple, make it easier to service, and it'll be pretty cool. So what I'm doing is I'm using the Fred Steele Roadster. Fred Steele was a legendary hot rodder. He had one of my favorite East Coast Roadsters of all time, and also his T, that was on the cover of the Ventures album, actually also has a Columbia rear that is activated mechanically, basically using stock Ford parts. So I took some photos a while ago of his cars that are in a private collection, and I was kind of looking at how that was done, and it seems pretty darn simple. I like how it was kind of hidden, and I'm going to basically use that as my inspiration and jump off point. Again, anything in hot rodding I think has already been done, and what we're doing is just putting our own spin on it or using it for inspiration, and that's what I'm doing here. So I'm going to get this up in the air. I'm going to try and use one of these old chrome shifters that we have sitting around at the warehouse to kind of fit underneath the seat, and a bunch of other parts, and hopefully by the end of this we will have a 2-speed rear that we can shift with our second shift lever. That look before you take the pliers off. Or actually, you can probably take them off carefully. I got a pretty good weld on that side. Go. Alright, now to hold it, now we can build our handle and swivel off of that.
Yep.
Alright, so I think the lever pushes, yeah, that way.
Yep.
So, what do we say? So the rod will be coming down here.
Right, your arm will be like this with the
bell crank on it, so it's going to pull or push. So
right, so you're going to need to push to engage.
So that would be push it forward to
engage high.
I don't know which is high and which is low, and I don't know which way. Yeah, I guess you could look at that, see which way it pulls.
Actuator there.
So that mounts like this, and it pulls, well, we don't know if it pushes or pulls, but it almost has to push.
If it's vacuum operated, it's going to, at rest, it's going to be in low, probably. Because if it would fail, you wouldn't want it to fail in high.
So it would be in low, so when your vacuum would push this way to push the lever out.
Yep.
So normal driving around town, you're going to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you push, when this pulls, so that lever, when I pull, it's going to pull the lever like that.
Right, that's going to release it though. You're going to have to push the lever forward for this arm to come this way.
Okay, so you push forward to go into overdrive. Yep, and then you pull towards you.
Pull it back, yeah, and then pull it back.
Okay, so at rest it'll be back and almost against the seat.
Yeah.
And when you push it forward, which is actually a little easier for us to set the lever up top.
Yeah.
Because that's the most of the time.
It won't be in the way.
Yeah.
When you're,
I was worried about putting it into high and he had to come towards you, and do you have enough throw that you don't
Right.
hit the seat? So if we get this in low and everything hooked up, then you, as long as you can get your hand around the lever, then you can push it forward because we have tons of room up there.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, there's no limitations on room going that direction.
So it's really just how far back we put this is dependent on how long we want that bell crank to be.
Yep.
All right, so we're gonna I'm gonna drill a hole here now that I have this first swivel or stud mounted. I'm gonna drill a hole in the sub rail where I'd like to put this shifter. And I'm going to drill 1 or 2 holes just to have a spot, so when we go from above I can just easily use a cutoff grinder or carbide burr and open up a slot in the shifter location. So I can get up, try and center myself. Maybe right there. We're going to open up that slot there. It's going to have to be adjusted, but I figured that was the best way to get us started. We'll take one of our shift handles. I'm going to drop it down. Once I cut this slot in the sub rail, I'm going to drop that shift lever down kind of unmodified and see where it wants to sit and where we can drop everything down. Then we'll start cutting up our shift handle and try and get it tacked to the swivel that I machined already that's on the stud, and then we'll start working our way back. Okay, I'm gonna try to let go and get the other side. So look, pretty good?
Yeah.
We have this is the chance that we can move it a little bit.
No, it's good in the slot.
I won't put too many mirrors underneath the car. I just won't put a mirror right there at the shifter.
There you go.
That part of the shifter. All right, so in the last couple shots, you saw I was doing some machining, some cutting, welding, and everything in between and kind of figuring. I was using the photos that I took off the Fred Steele Roadster as kind of a guide, like we mentioned in the beginning of the video. I'm sure there's better ways to do this. I sometimes use these old photos for inspiration because not only am I kind of replicating what they did so it looks kind of like it could have been done back in the day, but also gives me a jumping point because really I'm not that smart. So I am using other people's time that they took to figure it out to kind of jumpstart me. So I kind of took a reference of where the bell crank sat on his chassis and or on the torque tube and the rods and all that stuff, and then I'm trying to make my version of that. So I also took some calculations, some measurements, and I have my little marker board here that I always use for machining and different stuff just to make notes. Oops, flip around here. So I basically figured out that I needed basically from front to back with the shift lever here, I had 1.25 inches of throw is what I had. So the lever could move front to back, basically about 1.25 inches. Then up here at the actual rear, the lever moves about 1 3/8 inches side to side. So to put it from low to high, basically you have to have about 1 3/8 inches of throw to get that to engage into overdrive. So I was drawing up a bell crank, and then I took some measurements here of what I thought I needed, and just some crude drawings. And now I have something kind of mocked up. I'm just using I tack welded this rod that I heated and bent, you guys saw, tacked that to a bushing that I had machined, and that is looking pretty good. And then I just got vice grips that are clamped, but they're very loose so that the rod can still kind of swivel on there, just by crude way to try and figure out if this will all jive and if I can get this thing to even sort of engage. So you can see our slot we have up in the floor there, and that sideways slot that is basically like right there, that's so that we could take this lever off, the shift lever off of the torque tube. So I had to cut that little slot sideways, and you can do that. So now that I have this all mocked up, I'm going to try and give this thing a try and put it in, go from high to low with the lever from under the car, and hopefully with these measurements and calculations I took roughly, we can be somewhat close. So fingers crossed here. All right, so like I said, I have everything clamped up with vice grips, real light here, and I checked the swivel front to back with just one rod attached at a time. Now we're trying it with both, and we're going to see what's happening. So right now I actually have it in overdrive, so we're going to try and pull it back out of overdrive. Fingers crossed, nothing falls. Oh. Ooh, that looks like we're dang close, if not all the way in. I can always, of course, drill them and weld them up if they're wrong, but which may happen, but I'm trying to avoid that. So if I can get it basically in the right position. All right, so now teeth are engaged. Let's see if we're pulling it back out. Oh yeah. Yeah, you can definitely see that. Yeah, it looks like it's back in. Yeah, they're engaged. I think we're getting full throw here. Sure, it looks like it to me. Doesn't look like I could push that much more. So if we're getting it just from my crude vice grip mounting there, once we take all the extra slop out of this thing should work. I'll get you guys a shot here close so the gear's working. All right, so if you look in here, you can actually see right up in here where the teeth on the selector, where everything engages. So right now we're engaged, I believe, and I'm going to move my lever here. And of course the lever's kind of blocking you, but it looks like it's going, it's definitely disengaging, or whatever. Engaging, disengaging, not quite sure. But the teeth are separated there. And then I'm going to pull my lever back the other way. And I think they are. Oh, there it went. Yeah, so sometimes you gotta, oh yeah, we're definitely going all the way in there. I had to turn the wheel a little bit to get the teeth to engage. So yeah, we're getting full throw here, and I'm gonna add adjustment to all of this stuff out here. So all these rods, I'm gonna tap all them like they are on the other end for these old brake rods. And that will give us all kinds of adjustment to take slop out. So I think the next step is gonna be to cut these off, tap them, put our rod ends on them, and then drill our holes roughly where we want them. And fingers crossed, we're gonna get this to work without too much trouble. Alright, so I trimmed down and sanded and smoothed our little link here, just to make it, you know, a little less crazy looking. But I did test it off camera with the vice grips and everything, and it seemed like everything would work okay. And I did just test it, and it seems like everything is engaging and disengaging. I did have to put a little tiny bend in this rod here because it's not a straight shot. I got this sitting basically as high as it can get. You can see the link is like right at the torque tube, but it does clear, nothing hits, and I think everything is okay. We'll have to see, but I might need to put a little bit heavier of a Z in this just to get it to be a straight shot if it becomes a problem. But hand up here on the lever, I'll get closer. Everything seems to engage and disengage. Alright, so I need to still put pins with cotter pins and all these. I just have to dig some pins out from our stash. I just have cotter pins for the swivels just stuck in there. I don't have them bent, obviously. So all this stuff needs to be just finished up. I gotta pull the shift lever off here shortly and finish weld everything. I have this little, it's actually I think a push rod originally for a clutch on a flathead. I have that with the jam nut actually welded to this tube. So all that stuff I gotta finish welded. I have it just stitched up right now, so we gotta pull it apart anyways. But I'm gonna put it up top after I get that finished welded, and then we are going to heat and bend the shifter and cut it down, and then we should be just about ready to call this project done for now. Okay, so we got the car back on the ground. I took a break. I was working on Sunday, and now I have Steve here to help me. You can see we got the shifter. I don't know if I ever showed this, but the shifter is mounted backwards. So this is like I think it's a 37 or 39, I don't know, but it's like a swan type shifter that we flipped backwards. So what that does is the seat here actually the fabric's going to curve, and you can see the front of the seat sticks out quite a bit, so that's why we did that. So what we need to mark is right around here-ish. We need to put a bend to bring the shifter back up, like more vertical. We of course can get rid of all the excess. So I want the handle to be just, you know, almost the level of the top of the seat or just below the fabric. So I think if we make the shift handle about level with the seat, once they put fabric and everything on it, it'll be just a little bit below the level of the seat, which should be pretty good. And it'll keep it a little bit hidden and should work out. So I think if you got your marker there, Steve, will maybe mark the bend right underneath of the where the seat frame is there. And that'll give us something to aim for. And we might try and warm it up with a torch, but not get it like hot, just to help maybe flex the chrome a little bit. Probably is going to crack it, but we'll see what happens. So pull it back apart, bend the shifter, and then yeah, we'll be ready to get a shift knob on here shortly.
I hope you edit that out of your...
We might not. We might not. We don't know.
I just looked over and saw that thing playing.
That might be your new nickname again. Reclaim it.
Yeah, that's a...
Yeah, there's people that know you that watch these videos, so that might stick.
Yeah, my brother Bill always told me that.
Holy shit, that worked pretty good. Now they're putting 2 little dents in the back of it. All right, so Steve and I got everything all bolted up. Steve went through and put pins and cotter pins and in everything. So we took all those bolts out. So we actually took the pins that are meant to be in these brake rods for the swivel and cotter pin and everything. And I think it looks pretty good. So I figured I'd quick go over before we kind of finish the video here, just like the parts I used, because some people I think will ask about that. So I ended up using a shifter from like 37 Ford or something, but it had a nice bend to it. Didn't matter because we cut the bottom off of it. Welded some tubing in here to make the swivel. Then I took actually like a clutch rod that's threaded, welded a nut on there with a jam nut, and this is what helps you set your height of your rod that goes front to back, so that way you can get it kind of level, or if you need to get around something. We didn't know with when we set the car down if something was going to be a little different. So that's that. Brake rods, these are off like a 32 Ford, but you can use Model A or whatever, wouldn't matter. I like the nice clevises that are on them, or the links. I just cut and tapped everything if the rod needed to be shorter, so that runs back there. I used just a piece of plain steel here that we heated and bent, welded a swivel in the center and drilled holes, and that worked just fine. Again, this is another brake rod that I shortened and tapped. Had to put a little bit of a bend in it just to make up for the difference where it swivels and up on the rear, because obviously where this wants to be is up on the side and not underneath. So I got it as tight as I could. It just fits underneath of everything. There's just a little bit of room there, and you can see when I push this, everything clears just barely in there, and there's no problems. But the one thing I didn't particularly like on the Fred Steele car was that he had a lot of his stuff hanging really low, especially like his shift arm. So that required him to do some like bending and zine of the rods because of that. So keeping it nice and tight actually helped a lot. And then Steve went and made this plate. He just took a piece of metal, flat steel, cut a plate out. He cut a slot in it, and then he took actually an old dinner tube and cut a slot in that, and that's going to act as a gasket, and the slot's kind of tight around the lever for the Columbia. So it's the best we could think of to keep the gear oil inside. Of course, there's still going to probably be some sort of leakage there, but we thought that would be a good method. The shift boot that we kind of saw in there, or whatever that clutch release boot that I think Fred had on his, was decent, but it was a little bulky, and over time you could see where the little bends in it were, it was starting to rip over time and just leak out anyway. So that's what we did. We'll watch that and see if it leaks really bad or whatever. But now we can put the thing down and let's see how the shifter handle, I machined up a little adapter for a shift knob and cut down the shifter, and let's see how it looks inside the car and how it shifts. All right, so you can see I ended up bending the lever that was in one of the last couple shots before we did the outro here, where I put it in the press brake to get this lever to come up, and I think it's pretty good. The only thing we were discussing is when the padding and fabric's on here, it may be a little tight on the lever, but this lever is in low, which you're going to be driving around in most of the time. So that's where it's going to sit, and if it's tight against the fabric there, it's not really a big deal because it's not like we're going to be pushing it forward, not pulling it back. So I think that should work out. Let's see, and we've already tested this, but I figured I'd show you guys. I really like it's nice and easy to get the shifter where you want it. I was a little worried it would be too low or hard, but basically I put this little knob on here that's similar color that I had in my stash, but basically you just push it in overdrive and that's it. So that's all you do to shift it. Pretty easy, and it's not like you're going to be like speed shifting or anything that or have a lot of force, so I think it works out pretty good. And that's it. So at rest it'll be sitting here pretty close to the seat. I didn't want it real high over the actual seat itself. I thought it would be kind of odd to have the shifter like way up in here. So even that is a borderline a little high, but I think it's perfect because it's just right at the level of the material on the seat. It should work out good. And like I said, you can push it forward into overdrive, pull it back out, no problem at all. Everything is, you know, nice and easy to get to. I don't have to bend way down here. I know some guys that I've seen when I was looking at like the Ford barn or the Ham that had mentioned they had done them. Some people had put it like next to the e-brake lever, which then you're going to have to like grab way up there. So with this, it's really easy to get to take it in and out of overdrive. So pretty happy with it. Huge step, something I've been thinking about doing for like years now. So once we start driving this car and make sure this all works how I want, it'll be really good because then I can continue to do this on other cars in the future, and it really simplifies the whole Columbia overdrive setup and is an old school traditional solution to getting some better highway RPMs and of course keeping your Flathead a little cooler on the highway. So that's all I have for this one. Appreciate it. Hopefully this might help you if you're thinking about doing a 2-speed setup in your old school Ford. This is definitely a way that maybe will give you a jumping point. Hopefully it will be helpful. Thanks guys. Catch you later.